What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale. Our 2025-2026 NBA season look-ahead train rolls on. We're on to the San Antonio Spurs, which means I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Noah Magaro-George of the Vic and Roll. Go follow them. The links to his socials and the Vic and Roll will be in the podcast and YouTube description. Noah, how the heck are you doing?
So good. I mean, it's hard to imagine this off season from the lottery perspective, from some of the like low key pickups that they had this summer, going better for the Spurs than it could have. Like, I know everybody always wants them to add another star, and you know that's well within the fans' rights, but like winning, they're not outright winning. They didn't get Cooper Fly, but they got Dylan Harper. Like, how much better could it have gone? You just got, you know, Stephon Castle, you have De'Aaron Fox, you've got Victor Wembanyama. I'm doing great. Like, I'm so ready to cover a team that I think is ready to make a legitimate push to that next step. Like, we're not going to be talking rebuild anymore.
No, for sure. And it's also, but because they won the lottery and because De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama didn't play a ton together last season before he's out, there's so much mystery to this team. We're going to get into all of it. I didn't mention this to you before we're supposed to start. I'm doing a terrible job of this, of letting the guests know. I'm not texting during the show. I'm time stamping. So if you see me on my phone, I'm still listening. That's all I'm doing. It's supposed to remind you off air, but now listeners get a peek behind the curtain. I'd like to start with a bunch of the offseason stuff. The Mitch Johnson, him getting the permanent gig, following all the Coach Pop news, not a surprise at all. What did you, I guess the question for me is twofold, is do you think that they should have opened it up at all more beyond him? And then I think the more important question is, what did we learn about Mitch Johnson, the head coach, during his stint last year?
I definitely think you wouldn't be wrong if you were upset that they didn't open it up more than past Mitch Johnson. Like, because there were a lot of people on the open market. Like, a lot of coaches lost their job, and good coaches, like really good coaches. But no, I'm not really that surprised that they went Mitch Johnson. Like, I think with the Spurs, especially during the Popovich era, you've seen them lean into consistency, to continuity over trying something new, trying to like switch it up immediately. Like, I'm not surprised because it feels like this is a guy who's been with the organization for nearly 10 years now. He's gone through the ranks. He's, you know, gone from assistant to, you know, lead assistant to now head coach. And so, you know, I'm not surprised by that in any way. As far as like, what did we learn about Mitch Johnson? That is such a good question because I don't know. I don't know what we learned about Mitch Johnson. It felt like a lot last year. Like, that was a question consistently asked by a lot of the media members who were in the press conferences, in the media scrums, is like, you know, how much of this is you and how much of this is Pop? And, you know, pretty consistently, it felt like his answers were like, you know, I'm in constant contact with Pop. Pop has a say in all this. We're trying to continue what he built. So I feel like a lot of last year was just him continuing to preach what Pop has been, you know, teaching and implementing over the last couple of years, and certainly probably Pop's vision for what the team was going to look like if Pop stayed healthy last season. But this season, I think we're going to learn who Mitch Johnson is. Like, what does the offense look like compared to what we've seen from Pop? What are his defensive principles? And certainly, like, we're going to get into it in a second, but he brought in Corliss Williamson. He brought in, you know, Sean Sweeney, and those are guys who I think are very much known for, you know, like their defensive acumen. So what are we going to learn about Mitch Johnson? I think everything about Mitch Johnson this season. What do we know about him right now? I'm not really sure. So, and I hate to use that as a cop-out answer, but I really, honestly, I don't really know what we know that much about Mitch Johnson right now.
The De'Aaron Fox extension, fait accompli when they traded for him, at least him signing a deal. Were you surprised that it ended up just being the straight max there for 4 years?
A little bit, but, you know, in that same breath, it's like you have Stephon Castle, you sort of lucked into Dylan Harper. You just traded for this guy. I think you kind of want to show him that you're 100% committed. It is a lot of money, especially if he ends up deteriorating physically, if he's not playing up to the level that I think you would expect him or hope that he plays. But I still think he's fairly tradable if that, you know, comes to be the outcome that needs to happen, that they need to move him or for whatever reason. But I wasn't super shocked, but I was a little bit surprised because that is a lot of money for De'Aaron Fox, a guy who, you know, even with the hand issue last year, the finger issue on his, you know, dominant shooting hand, didn't have the most productive season. But again, that's, I think, more than a good excuse for him not to have his standard of, you know, like a 25-5-5 season on good efficiency. So a little surprised, but I think it's kind of something they had to do to prove like, hey, we're committed to you. Like we're fully in on you and Wemby being the faces of this next step for us. So not super shocked.
I think I was a little surprised, but I think the reaction would have been completely different had they just never gotten the number 2 pick. I don't think people would have thought that much about the contract. I had looked at his because it does feel like I feel like we're gonna reach a breaking point where some of these guys are not gonna become auto max extension guys. And the two names I had 3 names circled. Jaren Jackson Jr. came off the board as a renegotiate and extend. I had Fox and Trae Young circled as like I'm interested to see what their teams do with them. The fact that Fox got the max just basically without drama, like almost as soon as he was eligible for it. I mean, Trae Young's people have to be looking at that with the Hawks, like, oh, you don't want to pay me? Like they just gave it to the Aaron Fox. But now it's just on Trae Young. But clearly, we're not even in the era of aprons, whatever you want to call it, and seeing how much you could invest in 1 or 2 of your top guys. I think we're eventually going to get to a point where someone like the Aaron Fox wouldn't get the max, but apparently we're not there yet. And this was also a unique circumstance to where it's Victor Wembanyama's on his rookie scale contract for another 2 years. And so you have that 2-year cushion before you have to think about getting so expensive, because whether it's Devin Vassell or you're thinking about a Jeremy Sochan extension, you're not like, there's no one here that's about to break the bank for you. And I think that probably made it a little easier for the Spurs too.
I think so. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And also just, I think the Spurs, if you look recently, like the last 5, 6, 7 years, they really have done a good job of like taking care of their guys. Like, I think a lot of people would probably look at the contracts that they've doled out in recent history and gone like, man, that's a little bit pricey for, Devin Vassell, or maybe that's a little bit pricey for Pau Gasol. Like that's a little bit pricey for Rudy Gay. But I think they like to take care of their guys. I think when people are settled in the locker room, it makes it a lot easier to get things done, get people to buy into roles, get them to feel secure in the building. So like, I'm not saying it was all done just to show De'Aaron Fox like, hey, you got your money now, like whatever we do from here on out with you got to be okay with. But I think that's part of it. Like, I think part of it is taking care of the guys so that they feel secure and they're more ready to buy into what you're selling. So not super surprised that it happened, but a little bit certainly. Cause again, like that's a lot of money for De'Aaron Fox, especially coming off of a season where maybe didn't live up to the expectations once he came to San Antonio. Granted, he didn't play the max amount of games that he could have because they shut him down a little bit early, and he had the finger issue on his dominant shooting hand. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what this pairing looks like, because I think it could be really, really good between him and Wemby.
The only other offseason question I have is more macro. What do you sort of make of their direction to where, okay, the futzing and fiddling, you have Luke Cornett, you get Kelly Olynyk in. We can say, front court spacing is important when you're looking at the guards they have, but you're also tangentially linked to Kevin Durant, who's going to turn 37 after you just acquired De'Aaron Fox. And while it could have just been, oh, if we get him for this package, we're being opportunistic, it's just so bizarre because we're talking about all these young players. We're talking about De'Aaron Fox. We're talking about Kevin Durant. Like, what do you view as sort of their overarching mission after the offseason heading into this year?
Yeah, I still think they're sort of on that like pathway where they want to be competitive right now. They certainly want to help Wembanyama get into the playoffs, get that experience. But I think they're also still looking pretty long term. Like, I think they're looking at 2 different timelines. I think you're looking at a timeline where you can compete immediately. Maybe that doesn't mean win a title this year, but with De'Aaron Fox. And if something, breaks your way where there's a superstar level player or a max level player who wants to join San Antonio, you've got ammo to go get that player. Or if things aren't going your way and you need to offload some players, you still got guys in the chamber like the Stephon Castle, who maybe you don't know what you're going to get out of quite yet, or Dylan Harper, who, second pick in the draft most years. If there's no Cooper Flag, that's your number 1 pick. Like, this is and I'm sure we'll talk about Dylan Harper, but fantastic prospect in his own right, generational driver, generational touch, maybe not the best vision if we're talking about guys like a Trae Young or a Luka Doncic. He's certainly not in like that echelon of passer, but he is a good passer and he can create advantages, and the shot isn't quite there, especially off the bounce. But I think you're looking at these 2 timelines where you have a lot of options, and I think the Spurs are definitely happy to keep their options open.
Insofar as you think you can take away anything from what you saw post De'Aaron Fox trade, what were your early impressions of him, what he can do, and then if you have any early impressions of, okay, him and the Victor Wembanyama dynamic that we saw so little of.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked what I saw from him and Wembanyama. Like, I think De'Aaron Fox is still just lightning fast. I mean, he may not be as quick as the guy who came into the league, like a decade ago almost now, but he's still one of the fastest players. But I think he's added so much to his game as far as being able to change pace. His handle's a lot tighter. He's one of the best mid-range shooters in the league. And so, like, watching that next to Wembanyama for a few games, I thought their dynamic was really good. Like, it was, if they brought two to the ball, you're screwed because Wembanyama's rolling. There's nobody who's going to stop Wembanyama on the roll, even if you're bringing someone over from weak side help. Like, that's not going to stop Wemby. If you're trying to rotate over to stop Wemby, I think the Spurs' biggest weakness is that, like, if you somehow stop the two-man game, their spacing wasn't super great around them. Like, there were a lot of times where they were playing Chris Paul last season alongside De'Aaron Fox, or Castle alongside De'Aaron Fox, and then Sochan is also out there. But I'm less worried about that this season. I feel like that's still an issue, but I'm watching them together just in that 8-game span, and I think maybe it might be a little bit of a hyperbole, but I do feel like they could easily be like a top 5, top 6 duo in the league, just with what they bring to the table individually, but how they can play off each other as well.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of having someone, and now I guess you could have multiple someones if you consider Dylan Harper in the same vein of being able to get Wembanyama touches that will get him more downhill or at the basket, because we saw his rim frequency decline year over year, in part because I think he's just so important to, like, their floor spacing in ways that he probably, not that he shouldn't be, but he's too important to their floor spacing. You want to have to give him room to operate at different levels. And even in the short time he played with Fox, like, the percentage of his shots that came at the rim, like, those went up. And so I think that's going to be a big deal for him for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. If you had anything else to add.
I just thought, yeah, go ahead. It's all you.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that's definitely a great point that you're making, because, like, I think one of the biggest gripes from Spurs fans for a little while there was, like, Wemby is so big, he's so tall, he's only shooting threes. And I think, like, on a surface level, yes, like, yeah, he's shooting so many threes, but, like, I think we kind of have to consider that was he kind of had to. Like, it's easy to load up at the rim and stop him at the rim if you don't have any other options. And I think that optionality now that you have with Fox, where Wemby can pop, or he can roll, or you've got a guy who can get all the way downhill and create his own shot and get to the basket and get to his spots in the mid-range. Like, having that allows Wembanyama to operate in other spaces and have more space to operate within those spots. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right.
It's time to have the 3-guard talk, because I think that's going to define so much of the Spurs' present and future. Whether it's you want to approach it from how do you envision the Spurs handling this, or what you would do when looking at how much are we going to see these guys together? What is the ideal staggering pattern from your perspective? I'm so interested, before getting into all these limitations or strengths that people might be concerned or excited about, I just want to know, like, well, how is this team planning on navigating the 3-guard dynamic?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer too. I guess if I had to choose how I would navigate it, I'd love to see De'Aaron Fox sharing the court with Castle, or Harper sharing the court with Castle, more than I think I would like to see Harper sharing the court with Fox. Like, I think Castle, just because in my mind, from how I view him, I think he's more of like a bigger wing off-ball guy who can handle some secondary playmaking. He's more versatile in that way. Like, he's a great cutter. He's got great off-ball instincts. Whereas I think Dylan Harper, still at this point in his career, he's best with the ball in his hands. And I think you want to see him with the ball in his hands. And I think it's really hard to play him next to De'Aaron Fox and then justify putting the ball in Harper's hands over De'Aaron Fox's hands. And so I think to try to eliminate some of the, like, well, now this guy is, standing in a corner, or this, like, in a way that they're uncomfortable, let them play with Fox, or with Castle. Try to keep them staggered with Castle and them not playing together as much. I'm not saying I don't want to see them play together. That's something that's probably going to happen, and I think it should happen, but I would love to see Harper have the reins of the offense at times as that lead guard, because I think that's what's going to be best for his long-term development. And I think probably not on an identical track, but something kind of like we saw with the Thunder, where back when they had Harden and Russell Westbrook, where, like, Harden's coming off the bench. When Russell Westbrook goes to the bench, Harden's got the reins to the offense, and he's allowed to be the primary ball handler, and he's allowed to create for himself and others. And I think that's at least a rough outprint of what you can maybe hope for or aim for with Harper and Castle and also Fox together.
Do you think that the Spurs have enough supplementary spacing to, one, make it work when all three of them are on the court together, or even just when you're going to have two of them on the court together? Because a lot of what so many of them do best, and especially Fox and Harper, as you've already mentioned, like their ability to get downhill. And Dylan Harper's like blazing fast. I think even Dylan Harper showed that he could get off the ball quickly in summer league, and I think that I trust him to navigate the floor without the ball. But I don't know how to feel about his jump shot just yet. I think he's going to end up being fine, but early on, I could just see defense is not respecting him. Maybe there's some rickety just percentages when you're looking at him, whether he's wide open from the corners or pulling up from above the break or something.
Yeah, and I think that's still a concern for the Spurs because I'm looking through the roster right now. I made notes of people who I consider plus shooters or just average shooters, negative shooters, like, Wembanyama, Vassell. Those are guys who are going to space the floor, that can space the floor at a good volume. Same thing with Julian Champagnie, Harrison Barnes. But start looking at guys who are probably going to play a lot of minutes for them this season and really don't offer anything in the way of spacing. You've got guys like, Stephon Castle. You've got guys probably like Luke Cornett, who early in his career was shooting a good amount of threes for being a 7-3 guy, but really has moved away from that in recent years, doesn't really shoot threes anymore. And then, obviously a guy like Jeremy Sochan, Jeremy Sochan maintained his 3-point percentage from last season to the previous season, but the volume went down pretty significantly, which is significant because the volume was not that significant to begin with. So I think that's a good question that you ask. And then even guys like who are maybe just meh shooters like Keldon Johnson, Dylan Harper, I would say probably is either going to be meh to below league average. De'Aaron Fox, I'm not sure what to expect. Again, like we can talk ad nauseum about his hand and his shooting hand last season, but now that that's been addressed, does it look better? Like, does he get back to being sort of close to league average on good volume? Yeah, I'm not really sure that they have the spacing to make it work perfectly, but I think they're definitely going to be throwing out that 3-guard lineup at some point where you've got Castle, you've got Harper, you've got Fox on the floor at the same time. I'm just not sure that it's going to look that pretty.
Do you think so? When you're looking at it defensively, how do you feel about Steph Castle being like the de facto defensive wing during those minutes?
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. I think that's actually like where he was best last season. I think he did a really good job on bigger wings. Like Stephon Castle's not massive in terms of like height. I think he's like 6'5" or 6'6", but he's super strong. Like he's got grown man strength. He is so strong. He moves really well laterally. And I think he's fairly disciplined for like a young guy. Like, you even saw it at UConn. Like he's definitely wise beyond his years. He's got more discipline than most players at his age. So I'm not really that worried about that, but I do have questions about like, how does everything else look around them? But yeah, I'm fine with that. I think he can more than make up for it with his wingspan, his lateral mobility, his strength. Like I'm not really that worried about him being the de facto wing defender out there.
I think everyone's going to focus on what is the 3-point percentage or the jump shot percentage overall with him in year 2. But is there anything else that you're going to be tracking most closely about whether it's, being able to even just hitting a higher clip of his floaters? I think that's why some people are not so much higher. I don't want to compare the two, but Amen Thompson is a floor spacing liability. But because of what he was kind of able to do from like the short mid-range area a lot this season, they feel better about him being a more variable offensive weapon than just somebody who needs to cut or be in the dunker spot or blow by somebody on drives.
Yeah, and I think that's where I like kind of it's kind of separate my opinion from a lot of Spurs fans. And like, again, Spurs fans can feel however they want to feel. I love that they're excited about Stephon Castle, but I think they're very much on the mindset that like this is a future all-star. This is a future star. And I don't know that I see that because I just, again, like watching all the games last season, I watch every game twice. I'm diving through the numbers and even like the stuff that I have here in front of me, like out of everyone in the league last season who had at least 150 attempts on floaters or in that floater range on non-rim attempts inside the paint, he was bottom 10 in terms of efficiency. He was also one of the worst mid-range shooters in the league. He graded out as one of the worst 3-point shooters in the league. He was not particularly good off the dribble. He wasn't great off the catch. And even just like specifically on floaters, if we just isolate the floaters and we're not talking about just non-rim attempts inside the paint, like the touch wasn't great there. A lot of his separation was predicated on change of pace, but also just like brute strength, ability to lower his shoulder, create some
Guys
space,
just
bump
bounce
guys
off
out of the
him.
way.
It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. But like, that's my concern, is that like, if he's not able to become a floor spacer or create off the dribble a little bit better or be more efficient getting to the rim, like even his rim attempts, like directly at the rim, he was just sort of league average in that regard. So I don't know. I'm not saying that he can't get to another level, but I'm definitely more skeptical of his long-term outcome being star than most Spurs fans are. I think a lot of what we saw with him last year was simply opportunity. Like, are you going to have that opportunity now that you have Wembanyama healthy, now that you have De'Aaron Fox healthy, now that you've added Dylan Harper, now that you still have Devin Vassell, you still have Keldon Johnson, you still have Jeremy Sochan. There's a lot of mouths to feed. So my opinion would be, rather than seeing like a massive increase in his, like literal production as far as like points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, we'll probably see a drop off, which is not going to be any fault of his. But I'm more concerned with, like you mentioned, does the efficiency spike in any area that indicates that we can expect, any real signs of major development? I don't know. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I'm definitely a little more skeptical just having watched him. And I just don't know that I've seen anything that points towards like this guy's going to have like a crazy good season this season. And that's not to say he's not going to have a good season, but I'm more skeptical than I think most.
I have no rationale behind this, except for like there was a small stretch of last season where he looked super comfortable doing it. But because of his strength, and if he's going to be able to set, I have faith that he can hit like an Eric Gordon ultra deep spot up three at a semi-reasonable clip one day. They had him stationed out there, maybe like not as often as the season wore on, especially if he's going to be on the ball. I think that he can do it. I don't know what just having seen, it was like a 11 game stretch or something, I think towards the first quarter of the year. And I was watching, I was like, I think he's going to be able to do that. But that's counterintuitive to if we're worried about him upping his floater. Can you just hit a spot up three from like a few feet in there? But I believe that like he can be a threat, and maybe it just has to do with his strength. Like that's not going to be like a huge lift for him to get it off. But I honestly don't know how to feel about him offensively long term, especially in the environment that they have him in now.
Yeah, and I guess again, like I think I'm still pretty skeptical about him being a floor spacer in any meaningful. I mean, like quite literally, if you go by like there's a metric of total points added by shooters by combining their long twos, their free throws, their catch and shoot 3-point attempts, and their pull up 3-point attempts. The worst player in the league last season by that metric was Giannis, which obviously he's not. He got a lot better at that mid range, but like the free throws really offset that. He took a ton of free throws and he's still terrible there. The second worst player in the league was Stephon Castle. And I'm not saying that means he's always going to be one of the worst shooters in the league, but to me, that's not a great indicator. Like you look for the free throw percentage. Okay. Not great. You look at the percentage on the floaters. Not great. You look at the percentage at the rim. Pretty good. Is about league average. 3-point percentage off the bounce. Not good. 3-point percentage catch and shoot below league average. So there's just really like at this point, no indicator other than like, I feel statements and like in my gut, like in my heart, I feel like, you know what I mean? So again, I'm not a Stephon Castle hater. I think he actually could be huge for the San Antonio Spurs, probably in a reduced role as more of a connector, wing stopper. If he could add space, even just a respectable catch and shoot three, I think he becomes innumerably more valuable. But yeah, I think that's a tough ask. That's a really tough ask.
That's why I like talking about rookies and sophomores, because I feel like you're entitled to go off vibes just for like those first 2 years.
That's
like,
fair. That's fair.
So Dylan Harper, what are your early impressions of him? And just also, how would you expect, you talked about this a little bit when looking at the staggering stuff, but how do you expect the Spurs to bring him along in year one, especially again, because you have Steph Castle and De'Aaron Fox on this roster?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox, those are going to be your starters day one alongside Devin Vassell. And I think if you want to get the most out of Harper and his developmental track, I think you're going to let him take the reins of the second unit. I think you got to let him have those reps, have those touches, be the primary engine of that offense when the bench unit comes in. And I think that's fine. I would be very happy to see that because I think we saw that at times last season with Stephon Castle before he was an everyday starter. He was allowed to be a guy who got to run some offense off the bench. And I think that's the exact right thing that you want. I think the other thing at Summer League that kind of surprised me was one, like you talked about a little bit earlier, his ability to get off the ball and be effective as a cutter. He did spot up, and he wasn't great, but he definitely wasn't just stationary, standing in one place. He didn't look uncomfortable without the ball in his hands, and I thought that was a huge sign that, hey, like that's a big positive. That's a big positive, as opposed to someone who's used to having the ball in their hands and they're kind of just stagnant and they never move. They're never cutting. They're never relocating around the perimeter. But two, I thought his defensive effort was like night and day compared to what we saw at Rutgers. Like that, to me, that's an even bigger, like if you can get him to buy in a little bit and like put effort. Now, maybe that wanes a little bit if his offensive load increases over the years, but I would love to see that same intensity that I saw at Summer League continued throughout the season. Because I don't think Dylan Harper will ever be a plus defender, but I definitely think he can be like a net neutral, which to me is a win. That would be a huge win for the Spurs, considering his history as a defender.
Anything else about any of these guards, the 3-guard dynamic that's maybe flying under the radar we haven't talked about yet? Or is this team going to miss CP3 and like the ball control there? Is De'Aaron Fox good enough at that? Just anything at all?
Yeah, I think I'm fine. Like, I don't think, like, I think you might miss a little bit of like leadership. Certainly CP3 wasn't turning the ball over, one of the best as far as like assist to turnover ratio, but I'm not that worried as far as like turnovers going up a bunch. Like I think Stephon Castle is a pretty cautious playmaker. I think De'Aaron Fox is a great playmaker. He does turn the ball over a little bit more, but I also think sometimes we falsely equate like low turnovers into great playmaking. Like I think if you're a great playmaker, sometimes you got to take those risks. Like you look at the best playmakers in the league, the Luka Doncic's, the Trae Youngs, the Tyrese Halliburton's, like they turn the ball over quite a bit. But that's because they're trying to fit balls into windows that may just barely be there. You know, they're taking risks. They see things that other people aren't seeing. And again, like if the turnovers are up dramatically across the board, I could see how that would be an issue, but I don't really think that's going to be a big deal. I do think they will miss some of that, like kind of late game floor general, like gathering the troops together. Like this is our game plan. Like let's stay level headed. I don't know. Aside from really like Harrison Barnes, maybe any guy who really fills that vocal leadership void that's left behind with CP3, but we'll see. That could be definitely the difference between winning and losing a few late games, close games. But I'm not that worried about, losing CP3. And in fact, I was actually kind of concerned that they might be interested in bringing him back, because I think long-term development wise, they had to let him go to let other guys thrive.
Jeremy Sochan, I think we have enough evidence. They've tried to fit him into some different roles. We had point Jeremy Sochan. We see backup center Jeremy Sochan. I feel like at this point, it's safe to say that he feels best off as like a cutter and a wing defender. Where does he fit now, though, into the context of this team? Because I don't know. We were talking about the spacing. We're talking about the 3 guards. Where does he fit in with this team, and how do they like best optimize him?
Oh, man, that's so tough. I feel like I'm going to catch flack for this again, because I feel like people think I'm just a massive hater. But I think it's going to be really hard to find minutes, like big minutes for him, if you also have big minutes for a guy like Stephon Castle. You just can't really play them together. We saw that like their net rating together was terrible last season when 2-man lineups. So you can't play them together. And if you made me choose between Stephon Castle and Jeremy Sochan, I'm going to go Stephon Castle pretty easily. Like I think Stephon Castle's a better passer. I think he's a better connector. I think he's a little more versatile defensively. I think he's a guy who can ball handle a little bit better than a guy like Sochan. So like even as far as shooting goes, we saw Stephon Castle may not have had a good percentage from 3, but he was a willing spot-up shooter, whereas Sochan passed up on a lot of opportunities. And guys just left Sochan alone, even when he was out there. Like people still at least closed out to Stephon Castle, even if that might not have been in their best interest. People are willing to leave Sochan alone and live with the consequences. So I don't know how he fits long-term. I'd love to see him here. It's one of those tough things that you kind of grow attached to certain players. He's got a great personality. He's great on and off the court. He's high effort, high motor. But I don't know where he fits in long term, because he's not a ball handler. He's not a guy who can space the floor. He's not a self creator in any way. He's mostly a cutter. And like if that's kind of what you might envision for Stephon Castle in between his secondary ball handling opportunities, then where's the room for Sochan? That's a question I'll actually ask you. Like, where do you feel like Sochan fits in long term? I don't know.
don't think he does. And I think that's why I'm not there yet, and I've seen Spurs fans, which, again, rightfully so, love fans of all teams, why they get so upset when people think that the Spurs should have capitalized and moved Stephon Castle already because of the peak of his value and intrigue, because you're worried about that long-term fit. There's a case to be made that they kind of reached that point with Jeremy Sochan and have now passed it, because I even wonder if you want to optimize Jeremy Sochan, you can't also do that, and then we want Victor Wembanyama to get more paint touches. Like, it's just like it's not going to work.
It's not going to happen, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think his future's on this team. Which stinks because I was super high on. I actually was in favor of like the point Sochan experiment way back when. I remember talking to you about it. I think defensively he can be really good, but I don't know where the role is. I mean, even had they not gotten Dylan Harper, we would still be having the Sochan conversation too.
Yeah, and I think like part of it's easy to forget if you're a Spurs fan and you really love Sochan, and you think it can work with him and Castle, but like Sochan missed a lot of games last season too. So there was a lot of opportunities or not a lot of opportunities for us to see him and Castle together. But like, even when we did see them together again, like it didn't work great. And again, it's tough because I really do like Sochan. I don't think he's a scrub. I don't think he's trash. I don't think he should be out of the league. Nothing like that. I think he does have a bright future in the NBA. I just don't know that it's in San Antonio.
I don't love getting into player comps all the time, but I don't watch him, and like I've struggled to think of like, well, what could he turn into like with what he's doing right now? There's not like an excellent comp for him, I feel.
No, I don't think there isn't, and I think a lot of Spurs fans have likened him to Draymond Green, but I always tell them to pump the brakes on that because one, Draymond Green is in my opinion, he's one of the best processors off of DHOs that we've ever seen. He just has this innate ability to know when he should keep the ball, when he should hit a cutter. He can run pick and rolls alongside a guy like Steph, which obviously that's a luxury to have someone like Steph. It's also a luxury to have someone like Wembanyama. I would never ask Sochan to run pick and rolls with Wembanyama. Like, he's not a particularly good ball handler. He's not someone who's comfortable when guys pressure him, especially when smaller defenders get under him. And like, even though you wouldn't call Draymond Green a floor spacer, he certainly will shoot a shot if he's open. Like, Sochan doesn't really shoot threes even when he's open. And I don't think when you look at Sochan and you look at Draymond, like Draymond is an all-timer defensively.
Yeah.
Not only is he great at stopping guys like on ball, but he's also an event creator. Like, he comes up with steals, he comes up with blocks. He's a great weak side rim protector. He's a great presence in the passing lanes. Like, Sochan is good at stopping guys one-on-one, certain guys one-on-one, but he's not an event creator. Like, he's not coming up with a bunch of steals. He's not coming up with a bunch of blocks. He's not impacting the game in that way. So I just have a hard time going, oh yeah, like, this is a guy who should be his aspirational player. Like, because to me, that's unrealistic. Draymond Green is so, to me, one of one. Like, physically, maybe they're similar in terms of maybe wingspan, height. I don't even know that that's the case. But I think just because they play a similar position, the Spurs tried to force a round, peg into a square hole or whatever it's called. I'm sure I got that saying wrong for sure. I think it's the opposite way around. But just because they tried to make him be a point guard, yeah, he's not that. Like, he's not a point forward either. He's not that. So love Sochan. I do think he has a future in the NBA. I just, again, like, kind of like you said, I'm not sure that it's in San Antonio if you still have Harper and you still have Castle. And if you made me pick those guys, I would pick them over Sochan, unfortunately.
Right. How does this all impact Devin Vassell, who in theory is supposed to be a guard himself? And I love Devin Vassell, but Harper, Fox, Castle, Vassell, like that's going to be an interesting dynamic too.
Yeah, I kind of think Devin Vassell's impacted pretty negligibly. Like, I think maybe his like touches go down, his volume goes down as far as his like the primary touches where they allow him to kind of get to his spots and run some pick and rolls to get to the mid range. Like, that probably goes down a little bit because, again, like, they've got more mouths to feed. But as far as like what his shot diet looks like overall, like, I don't think it changes all that much. Like, he's still, at least in my opinion, your best floor spacer, your most reliable floor spacer. He's still like maybe, I mean, now that Fox is on the roster, he's definitely not your best, go get a bucket guy, but he's still probably the second best on the roster. If you said, hey, like, here's the ball, go get a bucket, like try to get a mismatch out of the pick and roll, draw the big, like that's not a lot of other guys on the roster, especially like guards/wings can do that. It's mostly just De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vassell, Harper who can do that at this point. Like, I don't really think you're looking at Castle to do that. You're not asking Champagny to do that. You're not asking Sochan to do that. You're not asking, Jordan McLaughlin, if he even gets on the court, to do that. Like, I don't think it impacts him that much. But I also think the addition of Harper definitely makes Vassell more expendable. Like, if Harper hits in a way that we don't expect sooner than we expect, like, definitely Devin Vassell is expendable. And I love Devin Vassell. I know you know that. I'm a Vassell truther. I'm a Vassell guy. But yeah, I think he definitely becomes more expendable. But in that same breath, like, it's kind of hard to move off of him because he is so integral to providing that floor spacing for a team that still largely has a dearth of that. They don't have a ton of floor spacing at the moment.
Yeah, the move, I know he likes to work on the ball, and he's like quietly, I mean, you mentioned this, he's like quietly, you trust him to make tough shots. You probably don't want him taking some of the shots he's taking, but like, he can take tough shots. But there's also, like, when he gets moving off the ball, that can put a ton of pressure on defenses. And so I hope he kind of enters offensively, not comparing them defensively, but like, it could be set up depending on how you just feel about Fox and Harper and if they're ever playing together. Like, he could be weirdly set up to like be entering the Derek White phase of his, like, in Boston, offensive like phase of his career. And you could do some stuff on ball, but you're gonna have to do a lot of your work, catch, go, or shoot. And I think he's capable of doing that. So, and we keep bringing everything back to sports spacing like you did, but I don't think, maybe there's a chance he becomes expendable, but I obviously, if you want this 3-guard dynamic to work, as of right now, I think he's arguably become like more important to tying that all together.
Sure, and I think that's fair. I just think, like, if you want to, like again, if Dylan Harper is better, like, I think, and I do think Dylan Harper is a guy who does have that all-star potential, but if he hits that sooner than we expect, I don't know that you can keep him and Castle and Fox, and maybe that does make Fox more expendable in the long run too, but there's so many possibilities with this team. It kind of just feels like a mystery box, and you open it and you're like, okay, well, whatever comes out comes out. Like, I don't know exactly what to expect this season, and I think that's what makes this season kind of fun. Like, there's so many different outcomes, and a lot of them are positive. There's not a lot of outcomes that I see like, oh man, like, this is just such a disappointing season. Like, this, like, I don't expect them to win a title. If they won a playoff series, that would be fantastic. But if they just made the playoffs or the play-in and they give a higher seed a run for their money, like, that to me is still a very successful season.
Yeah, they have to have one of the, I have not gone through this. They have to have one of the like highest floor to ceiling ranges in the entire league.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I don't think there's a scenario in which they are a team with a losing record, but I definitely think they could be a team that could either be like kind of middle of the table finish, like, in that play-in spot where they're just barely above 500. But I also think if things hit the right way and people gel in a way that maybe we don't expect them to, and maybe some people take some developmental leaps that we don't expect, like that, this could be a team that's like a top 4. And that sounds kind of ridiculous, I'm sure, to people, but like, if Wembanyama shows up and is a completely adds some, and we'll talk about Wemby in a bit, but if Wemby hits in a different way again, and De'Aaron Fox is healthy and that dynamic is working, and Devin Vassell is working, and you've got Dylan Harper off the bench playing better than you expect, and Castle's hitting, and Champagny is playing, like, I think they've got a really deep team. Like, I think that's also like one of the more underrated aspects of the team. I'm just looking at the depth chart as of right now, and it's like Fox, Vassell, Castle, Barnes. Those are all guys who would start on a lot of teams. Harper, that's fantastic. Again, he's a rookie, so maybe I'm not sure exactly what we can expect there, but Champagny's an NBA player. Keldon Johnson is an NBA player. Sochan can, play good minutes for you. Cornette, definitely somebody who can play good minutes for you. And then you've got Kelly Olynyk, who I think he'll be one of the guys who I'd love to see play in some weird lineups that we'll get to later. But yeah, I mean, like, this is a team that I think has more depth than maybe people are giving them credit for.
Let's talk about Wemby. It only took us 40 minutes to get here. Aside from we'd like to see him play in more games, be eligible for the awards, what are you watching for most closely from him in year 3?
Yeah, well, I think he took a massive leap from year 1 to year 2. Like even just in terms of like kind of diversifying his portfolio on offense. Like we saw him kind of work more spots around the court. But what I'm really looking forward to seeing him do is get to the line more often. And maybe that kind of isn't what everybody might be expecting for me to be looking for him. But just last year, I felt like he didn't get to the line that often. And I was like, well, is that just a I feel statement, or is that like real? Was that something that actually happened? And I went back, I looked through the numbers, and there's not that many numbers to look through. He's only played 2 seasons, but he had less free throw attempts his second season than his rookie season, but he averaged more points. And I'd love to see him get to the line more, because you look at all the players in the league who averaged at least 24 points per game last season, and he had the second fewest free throw attempts. And like, for me, a guy who, to me, is one of those guys like a Giannis or a LeBron James that like are so tough to officiate, I feel like he could be getting to the line more often. Definitely more than 4 times a game. Like that, getting to the line even 2 more times a game and shooting, 85% from the free throw line, like that's his career mark. Like that's takes you from, averaging 24 points per game or 24 point whatever to 26 points per game, something like that. So yeah, I want him to get to the line more often. I want to see him be more aggressive in that way.
I think that's a realistic goal to have too, when you now have, in theory, between Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox, like 2 guys who are going to get into the teeth of the defense, get so deep into the paint that now he's going to get these paint, or should get these paint touches that are not self-created. And so like when defenses are scrambling, they might be more likely to foul him. And I'm also kind of interested to see, I think that he can be a really good passer, and the handle might always be
I agree.
just a little iffy at times because he's so fucking tall. Like the distance that balls to travel is insane. But like, I'm wondering if he can get like if his assist totals can go up a little bit, because if he's going to be able to maybe operate out of like a short roll more when he's like going downhill and able to find cutters, or that, this is where the shooting is a big one though. Like if you have more proven shooters in the corners or whatever, I could see him getting easier assists, where I feel like he didn't have a lot of easy assists last year because they weren't set up for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you there. I did want to just touch on the free throw thing too for a second, because I feel like, again, with being like aggressive, and when I say aggressive, I mean like being physical and like leaning into contact, as opposed to, and I'm sure you've watched a ton of Wemby. Like he's box office. Everybody's watching Wemby. But one of the things with Wemby that kind of drives me crazy sometimes is he will opt for like the toughest shot on the court, instead of just leaning into contact. Like, guys play him physically. And I think a lot of times, instead of like leaning into that, trying to draw fouls, he kind of fades away. He hits those leaners. He's hitting like he's not leaning into the contact that is there that could get him to the line. But as far as the passing goes too, I think we have seen a lot from him as a passer. And I agree, like the easy assists, if people can just knock down the open opportunities, that will probably be there now that you have, Fox healthy, Wemby healthy. That's huge. I do think we could see a big spike across the board for him, even with more mouths to feed. I think Wembanyama is still the guy who, you're getting the ball to him as often as you can.
You have any early impressions of Carter Bryant, defensive monster in summer league, and how maybe does like, how are they going to bring him along, and then how would that impact? We're talking about all these trickle down effects, but when you're looking at a Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Julian Champagnie, how he might impact those guys' minutes more. I think Barnes is kind of, just because of the floor, like reliable floor spacing element, might be the most lock of the 3.
Yeah.
But he's also kind of the most, when you're looking at his contract, might be the most expendable. So, God, this team's so damn fascinating. Sorry, carry on.
No, yeah, no, I think I like Carter Bryant. I do think he's a project. I don't think he's a guy who plug and play. Like even at summer league, he was super inefficient. And loved the defense though. And like, that's something that I'm working on for my site right now, is a video on Carter Bryant and just his versatility defensively, his engine defensively. But I do think he's going to be hard pressed to get on the court, right? Like he's got a Usur, Keldon Johnson, Julian Champagnie, Castle, Barnes for minutes on the wing. And I just don't, unless there's like some surprise trade or injury, knock on wood, like I just don't see that happening. And I would anticipate they bring him along in very much the same way that they have a lot of the other younger guys on this roster, where it's all right, one-way ticket to the G League, and you're playing with the Austin Spurs. And I've always kind of liked that they've done that. In some ways I can see how it's frustrating. You've got young guys during a rebuild in the G League, but they're not in that rebuilding phase anymore. Like they're ready to start trying to win. And if you're trying to win, I just don't know that Carter Bryant is built to win right now. But I love the G League for the Spurs and the way they utilize it, where guys who, even though when they get to the NBA, their role will never be primary ball handler and playmaker, they kind of force them into that role in the G League. We've seen it with guys like Keldon Johnson. We saw it with even a guy like Luka Šamanić a little bit, like force them to operate outside of their comfort zone and round out their skill set. And I think in the long term, that'll be helpful for Carter Bryant. And then again, also, with the Austin Spurs G League, like nobody really cares about the record. There's no pressure to win. There's no pressure to perform right away. I think that's probably the most likely path for Carter Bryant is we're going to see him play every game possible with the Austin Spurs. And then when they have lulls in their schedule, they will call him back up to the team so he can watch from the bench and learn something on the sideline.
Yeah, his offense was rough in Summer League. I really hope I just want to see him, Castle, and Wemby on the floor together because I feel like that's just like a defensive terror between those three.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare. You would be giving people an absolute like one-way trip that would just be terrible for if you're out there and you have to face that would be terrible. Those guys would be flying all over the place. But yeah, I mean, the likelihood that he's going to get on the court too many times this season, I would set the over under at like 10 games. I don't think he plays more than 10 games.
Damn.
For the Spurs unless something happened. Well, I mean, I'm just looking at like guys like who a lot of Spurs fans really loved, and like City Sissoko, like he maybe played like 10, 15 games last season. And it's like at the very end of games where the result is already settled. You're just out there as a formality to close out the game and make sure no one else has to spend another minute on the court. So I just would be really surprised if he plays in any real games in any meaningful way.
The other Spurs kid that had people buzzing, David Jones-Garcia. What are your early impressions of him?
I like him. I do think he's kind of just like on a you earned it two-way contract. I don't anticipate he'll play a lot. Like he is a little undersized. But what a show, man. He put on a show. He was awesome in the G League last season too. Like I think at some point last season in the G League towards the end of the season with the Mexico City Capitanes, he was on a roll where he had like 51, 45, 36, 34, 48. Like the guy can score the ball and he can score from multiple levels. Like he is a legit self-creator. That being said, undersized, not much of a playmaker. Like he's not really doing much for other guys. And defensively, he's kind of a wash. I don't expect him to play a lot for the Spurs, but man, he's like a feel-good story. Would love to see him get on the court at some point because he really is like, he's so much fun. Like he's strong. He's got a little bit of burst. His handle's pretty refined. He understands how to play with pace and change the pace and use angles. Like such a smart scorer. But again, he's one of those guys that I don't know where you fit him into the rotation. Like there's too many guys. There's just too many guys that I just don't see him. I don't see him playing in like, as far as the other two-way guys, Riley Minnix and Harrison Ingram too, just to kind of get them out of the way. I don't really see them playing that much, though I do really like Riley Minnix. I will say that I'm a Riley Minnix believer. I don't know that he plays for the Spurs much this season, but love his game. Love Riley Minnix. So shout out to him. But yeah, those guys probably not playing much.
What stands out about Minnix to you?
I think he's another one of those guys who just super high feel, has legitimate NBA range, great catch and shoot guy, can shoot off movement. In the NBA, will he ever have the ball in his hands? Probably not, but he's got a really sweet low post game where he can turn over either shoulder. He works that pivot foot. He's hitting that secondary bump, creates space through his physicality, gets to the line. And then he also just keeps the ball moving as a passer. Like he's just a really cerebral player, who I think could play in the NBA, but defensively, like he's a little bit slower. Like his feet are a little heavy, not the best lateral mover. But just a fun player. Like I believe in him as like a guy who probably could break into the end of the rotation for someone. But as far as the Spurs go, I mean, they just have too many guys. They just got too many guys who I just don't think he's going to see the floor very much this season either.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter / lightning round portion of the podcast?
Absolutely. I'm ready to go.
So we've talked about probably a bunch of their biggest needs or concerns, but to wrap it sort of up, what do you view as like this roster's biggest potential hole right now?
Yeah, biggest potential hole, I think maybe like the front court depth honestly is kind of like if they run into, and like, this is a very hyper specific scenario, but if you run into somebody like the Thunder who they've got Hardenstein, they've also got Chet Holmgren, like I don't know that they have a ton of front court depth. You're looking at Wembanyama, Cornette, Olynyk. I guess you can throw Barnes and Sochan in there. I don't really view them as bigs, but yeah, I mean, like they're not a particularly big team. They're not a particularly, I mean, they don't have a ton of depth up there, but that's hyper specific. I think really the main concern for me is that like they're not going to have a ton of space to operate, even with like Fox and Wemby and like that. Those things more bother me than anything. So again, that may be a little bit of a cop out answer, but it's mostly the spacing. Like I just, I want to believe in these guys knocking down their open shots, but there's only a handful of guys I really trust. And I think we went through some of those names, like guys who will be off the ball, like Vassell, Champagny, Barnes. Other than that, Waters can do that, but he's another guy who I don't really see playing that much.
No, I was building when I was trying to map out their 10-man rotation. I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to put him. I couldn't do it.
I like Lindy Waters though, but yeah, I don't think he'll play.
I actually really like him too, probably way too much. But so what do you view anything about this team, whether it's a strength, it's a concern, a storyline, theme, whatever, that's flying under the radar that we haven't discussed yet?
Flying under the radar for the I think again, like the depth. Like I do think they have a good amount of depth overall on the roster, and I do think they have a lot of players who can fit a lot of different roles. Like I think if you wanted to label them traditionally, you probably could call Stephon Castle a point guard. He played a lot of point guard last season. Dylan Harper is a point guard. He played point guard. De'Aaron Fox is a point guard. He's your starting point guard. But a lot of these guys can play a lot of different roles. Like I can easily see, Stephon Castle can play off the ball. Dylan Harper, I have a little bit more belief in him playing off the ball after watching him in Summer League. De'Aaron Fox definitely can play off the ball. There were a lot of moments where when he was with Sacramento, he played off the ball or was the roller when Sabonis was like that, in those inverted pick and rolls. So like I believe in those guys to play off the ball, play a lot of different roles. Julian Champagny is a guy who, he may not be super versatile in terms of like what he brings offensively. Like, what he's going to do. He's going to spot up. He's going to cut. That's about it. But defensively, I think they have a lot of guys who can switch and cover a lot of different players. And I think that's probably their biggest strength is just looking across the roster. You have a lot of guys who on their own, I think are impressive defensively, but now next to Wembanyama, it allows them the freedom to gamble a little bit more, to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think that's something that by the end of the season, I think that'll be one of the areas that the Spurs lead in the league probably will be like turnovers forced. Because I think guys will be able to just be more aggressive in the passing lanes, take a few more stabs at the ball, on ball, and not worry about their guy getting by them. Because guess what? When Wembanyama healthy, he can cover a lot of those mistakes. I'm not saying he should have to, but like I would be fine if guys take some more gambles and try to force, turnovers in that way and not be as disciplined, because I think they have the luxury of being able to do that with Wembanyama there.
And that would be good for their offense too, just to create as many easy opportunities in transition as possible off of those turnovers. That would wind up being huge for them, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you can get these guys out and running, this is still a pretty young team. Like all things considered, they're a young team. They like to run. They have a lot of good athletes. Like I think that's one of their greatest strengths is their athleticism, their length, their versatility. So I think if there's anything that people are underlooking, I guess, or overlooking rather, is just depth and their versatility defensively.
What do you view when you're looking at who are going to be the 10 most played players on this team? Let's frame it that way.
Yeah, Fox, Vassell, Castle, Barnes, Wembanyama, Harper, Champagny, Johnson, Sochan, and Cornette. I would love to sneak Kelly Olynyk in there somewhere, but we can talk about him and maybe some funky lineups later on.
They're just like so much. Their floor spacing is like now rooted in like that center spot, basically. If you consider Kelly Olynyk, it's like Victor Wembanyama and Kelly Olynyk are in theory two of their best floor spacers with Devin Vassell and like Champagny. Like it's all in the front. Like if you consider Harrison Barnes and Champagny playing a lot of minutes at the 4, it's like most of their floor spacing is just coming from the 4 and the 5, that's just a weird balance to strike.
It is.
So, are we? When this is to some extent matchup dependent, but what do you think is going to end up being their go-to closing unit? Do you think it's just going to default to the starting five, or do you think that there's the potential for Mitch Johnson to futz and fiddle there?
I kind of think it is going to default to the starting five because those are the five players who I think I would trust the most in crunch time, like Fox, Vassell, Castle, Barnes, Wembanyama. You've got a good blend of defensive acumen. You've got a good blend of floor spacing, ball handling, advantage creation. I think that, but I also agree, like it probably, yeah, as is the case with any team, it probably will be matchup dependent. Like I think there's definitely scenarios in which, okay, if we're up by a good, like let's say you're up by 4, that's still considered a crunch time minute, five or more points, whatever. You're up by a couple of baskets and you're just trying to get stops. Like I would probably be taking Barnes out of the game and throwing Sochan in there. Like I trust Sochan more defensively than I do Barnes at this point. Like Barnes is a great floor spacer. I think he can be serviceable defensively when he's put on probably the worst wing scorer on the team out there. But like I would just trust Sochan more. But like if you're behind and you need more scoring, maybe they throw in a Dylan Harper instead of a Barnes, and maybe they do roll with a 3-guard lineup, something like that. But largely, I think it's probably going to look like that Fox, Castle, Vassell, Wembanyama, and Barnes. Like I think that's probably what it's going to be.
You teased it before. What's a weirdo lineup you would like to see Mitch Johnson try this year?
Yeah, I want to see Fox, Harper, Castle, Olynyk, and Wembanyama. Like I think that would be. I think that would be a lot of fun. Like I think you've got the 3 guards out there, so you got Fox, Harper, and Castle. You've got Olynyk, who I think you could slide down to the 4 for some more floor spacing to kind of supplement what you might be losing with Fox and Castle, and even Harper to a degree too. And then you got Wembanyama at the 5 there. That's one that I think could be a lot of fun. I don't know that that's one we're going to see very often, but that's one that I think would be a lot of fun to see out there for sure.
I want to see them go 4 guards. So
okay, let's hear it.
Harper, Castle, Fox. Then we're going to throw Vassell out there, and I think Wemby has to be the 5 in that situation. I think my eyes might bleed watching their offense with this, but like let's go the all defense route with Wembanyama, Castle, Sochan, throw Carter Bryant out there, and then I guess Champagnie after that.
Yeah, Champagnie. Yeah, I would throw him out there.
So I don't know what the offense looks like, but like Champagnie and Wembanyama can hit threes, maybe But the offense would be ugly, but I think that defensive unit would just be insane. Because I think those are their 5 best defenders. I don't really know where to rank Champagnie in that.
Yeah, I would put him there. I would put him in there as one of your 5 best defenders for sure. I think, yeah, I mean, if we're talking like defensive rating, they're holding teams to like 75 points per possession, but they're also scoring like 62 points per like per 100 possessions. Like I don't know how that would work offensively at all, but I love the idea of like it being like a 2004 basketball game where like the final score is like 77-76, like that. Those kind of vibes. That would certainly be an interesting lineup. I have one more for you. I don't know if it's that weird, but I do like the idea of like Fox, Vassell, Champagnie, Wembanyama, and then Cornette at the 5.
That's weird.
I specifically, and this is one that I had a specific team in mind. I would love to see that against the Thunder. Like I think that would be one of those lineups that you could trot out there and combat the 2 big lineups that you get with Hardenstein and Holmgren.
I think that would be a really good lineup to try against the Rockets, Steven Adams, Alperen Şengün minutes too.
Yeah,
to try.
But those are my weird lineup. I don't know if they will happen, but I would love to see even the one that you threw out there.
Your first one, I think, better. I feel like they're obligated. If you're ever going to play 3 guards and like the 3-guard lineup at any point, I think your first one is like that's an obligation. Mitch Johnson needs to try that one.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Olynyk and Wembanyama would be the floor spacers there. So again, the theme of the floor spacing coming from the 4 and the 5, I think it would be interesting. I think it probably will happen at some point. I don't know that it will happen a lot, but I would bet money on it probably happening at least once or twice. There's just so many possibilities with this roster this season that I feel like Mitch Johnson as a first-year head coach, and again, I said I'm not really sure what to think of him and what we know about him, but I feel like he has a lot of liberty to just try things and see what sticks, especially early on.
I am team #try shit. So I hope they do. Anything else about this team we haven't discussed? I haven't asked you that you think needs to be touched upon before I force you to make some predictions.
No, I think we've covered pretty much all of the bases. I think when we look at this team, they to me are going to be better than I think a lot of people expect. I would not be surprised again if they end up being like a top 6 seed and they just outright make the playoffs. I wouldn't be that shocked. But we also talked about having like kind of a lower end outcome from them where they have a big range of outcomes. I also wouldn't be surprised if they're like near the bottom of the play-in and like fighting for their lives to get in that last like 8th or 7th seed by winning in the play-in. Like that also would not shock me a ton just based on like their personnel and it possibly not gelling super well.
So how many games do you ultimately see them winning? And if you had to pick, where do you see them falling in the West as their most, realistic spot?
Yeah, I think realistically, like 45 to 46 games, I think that's realistic for them. And I think that could probably, just given how deep the Western Conference is, unfortunately, probably puts you like
That could be
8 or ninth. So I think that's probably what we're looking at. But yeah, I'm excited for this team, but I'm not ready to say like, oh yeah, they're first to book it. They're definitely top. They're not. They probably aren't.
I struggle with their floor. I think I might think it's a little lower than you do, just because when you're trying to go through, I look at it, okay, like who are the teams they're guaranteed to be better than? And so it's like Utah and New Orleans are just, New Orleans thinks it's going to be good. They're going to be terrible. It's like those two teams are going to be bad right off the bat. I think it's a little early for the Blazers. The Suns, I think, are going to be a dumpster fire. Like they'll probably win right around 36 games again. So there's 4 right there. And then when I get after that, like would I probably give them the edge over the Kings? Yeah,
I would.
But I think it's like when you're looking to guarantee, okay, how many teams will you guarantee that they'll be better than? I'm probably prepared to go to like 4. And like that's not to say I expect them to finish higher than 11th. I want to make that clear. But it's just when you start to go through the West, we say this every year, and I know this offseason there wasn't like a ton of fireworks aside from KD going to Houston, and then Memphis loses Desmond Bane, so they could be worse too. It's just brutal in the West. We talk about floor to ceiling for the Spurs specifically, but I think you can talk yourself into like, yeah, a team like the Warriors, if they're healthy enough, they could just be the 3rd best team in the West. Or if the Grizzlies get good health from John Morant, they could be up there. It's just, it's going to require a level of consistency from the Spurs that we just haven't seen during the Wemby era. And I'm just curious how they juggle that with the player development specifically of Dylan Harper and Steph Castle above everybody else.
Yeah, I think I think those are all fair points. I again, at the end of the day, though, I do feel, and maybe this is a little bit of me being like hopelessly optimistic, but last season, and again, this is last season, early in the season, they were something like 14-11 before like Popovich went down and a lot of the players started getting injured. And like, I don't know. I feel like they were on a pretty good pace to at least be somewhere near 500. And I look at this roster this season and just hoping for some development from some guys, and then guys to kind of either who have come in kind of meet expectations, if not exceed them. I feel like you're set up to be better than last season when you were healthy. And like that, the Spurs were not good last season, but they also were not healthy for most of the year. And that's a big question mark too. Like, can Wemby stay healthy? Can De'Aaron Fox stay healthy? Will Sochan stay healthy? Will Vassell stay healthy? Like all 4 of those guys, I wouldn't necessarily say they're injury prone, but they definitely haven't played, full seasons for San Antonio in a while. So, yeah, it's fair to question it, but I think if they're healthy, and that's a big if, I think they could be a lot better than most people anticipate.
I think the biggest argument in their favor is the most reductive one, which is they were a plus like 2.3 points per 100 when Wemby played last year. And this team objectively just has now better talent because you have Fox and Harper, and then Steph Castle's a year more into his career. So, and like the backup center stuff, like you feel better about it having a Luke Cornett there than you would have at any point last year too. And so like, that's just, yeah, it's reductive, but it's, well, look at what they did with Wemby on the court last year. If he's healthy, like now they're better. Is there a team, looking at it through a playoff lens, that you find is a particularly intriguing or even concerning matchup for San Antonio?
Concerning, only the Thunder, because I think the Thunder scare the shit out of me. If I'm anybody, I think the Thunder scare the shit out of me. They're so deep. They're still super young. They're still super talented. Like probably their 2nd and 3rd best players have not reached their peak and will continue to get better. So that would scare me. Like if the Spurs somehow made the plan and they end up being the 8th seed and they have to face the Thunder in the first round. Okay, well, like, all right, I'll be ready for a 4-game series probably. But as far as like a matchup that I think would play in their favor. I actually would really love to see them play the Nuggets because I think they match up really well with the Nuggets.
Okay.
The Spurs over the last 2 seasons, I think they've played the Nuggets 5 times and they're 4-1 against the Nuggets. Wembanyama has played Nikola Jokic phenomenally. Nikola Jokic has been pretty inefficient against Wembanyama because even though he can kind of bully him out of the way with his body, those insanely long Gumby arms just like swallow up those hook shots and those little baby hooks and turnarounds. Like he has done a really good job there. And then I think the Spurs also have the depth to kind of give the Nuggets fits a little bit. So I really like that matchup. And last season, the Spurs were 2-3 against the Nuggets. And the one game they lost in overtime. And this is a team that was, every time they played them, they weren't healthy. Like the Spurs were not healthy. Wembanyama was not available in that overtime game either. So I like their chances against the Nuggets. I'm not saying they would upset the Nuggets or beat the Nuggets, but I don't think it would be a 4-game series or a gentleman's sweep. I think you're looking at something that goes 6 or 7 games if everybody's healthy.
I probably would have picked the Nuggets, but for variety's sake, I'm curious how they would match up in a playoff series against the Timberwolves because it feels like the Timberwolves are huge at every position except for point guard, but Wemby is the exact type of big that can play Rudy Gobert off the floor. Because I might talk about Rudy Gobert's the defense. Yeah, it's not the best matchup for him, but Rudy Gobert's offense against what might be the Spurs' defense, that could become a problem for Minnesota. And then, okay, what is it like? Are they just going to default to Naz Reid and Julius Randle as like their front? That would be an interesting chess matchup if we got a best of 7 series between those two teams.
I like that one too. I like that one a lot. I will definitely stick with my Nuggets one. But yeah, I like that one too. But overall, yeah, I think if I had to bet on them winning a series next season, maybe not, but I think there's always a chance. Like I wouldn't say that they would automatically be a first round out. I think that they have enough talent around them that they could surprise somebody. They definitely could surprise someone.
Noah, this was great as always. Thank you for giving me so much of your time. Are you able just to tell our audience where they can find you and all the fantastic work that you have planned for the upcoming season?
Yeah, so we've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but you can find me over at the Vic and Roll on Substack, the Vic and Roll on TikTok, the Vic and Roll over on YouTube as well. So like anywhere you want to find my work, it'll be there under the Vic and Roll. We're doing videos, we're doing podcasts, we're doing articles. But yeah, super excited for the Spurs season, super excited for the basketball season to be back, for the NBA in general. And as always, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy talking hoops with you. I always look forward to this every year at this time of the year.
Well, thank you so much. The links to all of Noah's stuff, where you can find him, will be in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Once again, thank you. This was fantastic as always. I always have a blast picking your brain. Until next time, we leave everybody with the shout out to the one, the only, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.